inviting the 5th Investment Lab Advisory Group. That meeting is in the Bordeaux room. There has been some confusion. Thank you, dramatically. I would also say, first of all, there is another meeting in this room, this chamber, at 5 o'clock. So we are anticipating ending slightly earlier than that. So if we can end by 4:30 or 4:45, that will give people, especially accountants who are in that meeting as well, the chance to refresh themselves beforehand. Next thing to say to anyone who hasn't been in this building or in this committee before, this is the council chamber. You are very welcome. If there is a fire alarm, I'm not expecting it to be a drill, this way. So if there is a fire alarm, it will be real, and therefore the quickest and safest thing to do is to leave by the main entrance and assemble in front of the people. Unless that way is on fire, in which case go the other way. But you will be advised. So thank you for attending. Are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, sir. We have apologies from Councillor Freeman with Councillor McAllister substituting, and apologies from Councillor Blenkinsell.
And does anyone have any particular declaration of interest that they want to alert us to? Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure it's relevant to this meeting, but I am a non-executive director of Bristol, just in case it comes up. Does anyone else want to remind us of anything they're a non-executive director of? That's perfect. Thank you very much.
I didn't think it was relevant, but I'll just mention that I'm an non-executive director of Bristol Waste, since you asked the question. Thanks.
Bingo. So the first 3 items that we have to note are the chair, vice chair, and members of this committee following the last full council. This is to note the committee doesn't have any choice in that matter, but it is important that we do recognise what those roles are, and to address those all 3 items together. I just want to welcome our new members. All 2/3 of our new members, to say congratulations on joining Westminster. So, and look forward to your contributions. As I really hope this is one of the most bipartisan committees that we have. So I do hope that spirit will endure. And the last thing to say about the committee membership is that this is Simon's last meeting. So Simon Cookson, who's sitting over there, this is his last meeting as an independent member after I think 9 years? 7.5. So thank you very much for your contribution over that time. I've got some information later on about the future of independent members, but I just wanted to publicly thank you for your contribution to the committee over that time. Brilliant. So I assume we're able to note all of those 3 items. If anyone has an objection to those things, please do so. Item 7 is similar. It's the membership of the Values and Ethics Subcommittee. This is traditionally chaired by an independent member, and we have some news on that front. So obviously Simon is coming to the end of his term today, and Berwick came to the end of his term at the previous meeting. So we have been seeking to appoint those positions, and we've had partial success. So those positions have been advertised, and their interviews have taken place. There was one successful candidate. Now, the monitoring officer isn't here today, so I assume that candidate has said yes. I had confirmation following that happened, but I assume so. So there was one absolutely outstanding candidate who has been recommended, and she would be expected to chair the Values and Ethics Subcommittee. The appointment is actually made by full council, so there will be a recommendation to full council, to the next full council in July, and we would expect that new member to join the committee immediately afterwards. So the fact of been appointed by full council won't actually stop or go into any audit committees. But we were only able to appoint one. So that means there is a vacancy, so the opportunity to be an independent member of the committee is still live. And if anyone here or anyone watching or anyone who knows anyone, that opportunity is still available. And I would encourage people to put those forward, and particularly apply to the Section 151 officer if you're interested in that role. We are told the dates of future meetings. I think that's fairly straightforward. We have a review of our terms of reference. I didn't think there was anything particular we needed to draw attention to. But does anyone have any issues or comments about the terms of reference as we are reviewing? Yes, thank you for reminding me that there's not much to change since last time. Nick.
Thanks. Just wanted to flag one item, which will become relevant later, is that our terms of reference include reviewing the risk register, and I think something that we discussed at our recent workshop is whether that means reviewing individual risk register line items or how the risk register functions. We can talk more about that later on the agenda.
That's really helpful, thank you. I believe part of the plan is to have I think we call it a deep dive, I believe the plan is that each opportunity to review the risk register will concentrate on a particular issue.
I think, Chair, that's fine. I think there's no issue with the terms of reference, but I think it's how do we make sure that we achieve the objective. So for the purpose of this item, I think terms of reference are okay, but to have that conversation, when we look at the corporate risk register, I think that's what we agreed, that the audit committee will, in advance of every meeting, identify a risk that we want to delve into, so that we can give the senior responsible owner the opportunity to prepare and come and present, which gives the audit committee the opportunity to clearly understand the risk and what we can bring taken. Otherwise, yes, the summary is good, and it's also challenging the strategy resources at individual policy committees as well. They look at those individual risks, but in here, we want detailed assurance.
Chair, so I can that approach would definitely work in terms of us coordinating resource to this meeting also, because whilst we have the quarter 4 risk report on this agenda, myself and Steve will be coming through that, but we're not the owners of all the risks in the corporate perspective, so if we are looking more deeply at a particular risk, we can make sure that we've got a responsible officer who's the risk owner.
Okay, I think that's really helpful. Any other comments on the terms of reference?
Thank you, Chair. On the section talking about the composition of the values and ethics subcommittee specifically, it does have the phrase, it will be composed of 4 elected members of the audit committee, 1 from each political group represented on the committee. I'm conscious there's nothing that forces us to have 4 elected groups. That's how the maths of the chamber works out, and we have 4 members represented on the audit committee. That might change in the future. Does this need to reflect that, or can we alter that fairly easily, or does this commit us to only ever having 4 members of that subgroup representatives?
I think the intent is that we will have 4 members, and I think given the nature of the types of issues to be identified, it does need to be a subcommittee to be able to make decisions. I think the proposal is that it will be 4. But you make a good point that we need to make sure that continues to be represented.
I'm just wondering, in the event that we have more than 4 parties represented on the audit committee, that might cause some issues about which parties get represented on the values and ethics subcommittee.
That's a really good point. Thanks. Okay, that's really good. Right. If we could then move to look at the minutes of the last meeting. Does anyone have any comments first of all regarding accuracy?
Thank you,
Chair. So it's just in reference to the external audit plan and the reference to materiality, where we've described that the materiality is increased to 2%. I think it then goes on to say that other councils have materiality up to 20%. That'd be great if they did, but they don't. It should be 1%, so it should be as low as 1%.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Any other points of accuracy? So, members happy that we can agree that as an accurate record? Thank you. Are there any matters arising that members would like to draw our attention to? Nick?
Yeah, on the briefing into the Stepping Up programme on the 10th of April, I wasn't able to make. I haven't seen an output of it. I know it was our intention to put some kind of statement on the public record eventually, but I've not even seen anything that's happened yet.
Watch this space. That issue will be addressed shortly. Any other questions? Okay. Great. So we can move to the action log. I do need to draw members' attention to the first item. So the question, which is around the comparisons of the City Council to other local authorities in relation to Freedom of Information Acts and subject area and subject access requests. There's no substantive answer in that action list, and that detail has now been published. So if members have noticed the supplementary release for this meeting, which also includes responses to public forum, that detail is provided there. So I think that information actually shows in that item. But there we are. Were there any items on the action log that members wanted to discuss or draw attention? On members of the meeting, I will just reiterate point 11, which is the point around the member briefing on property transactions, where date was identified and then delayed. That was at the request, because there was some work being done in that area. So it's really important that we don't lose sight of that, and that item will be rescheduled. I don't think we've heard from the service when that will be, so we need to, ideally it should be before the next 4 weeks.
Just about item 10 on that list. Thank you for the detailed explanation there. That's useful information that I don't think we had previously.
There's no other comments on that. But if I can just thank the officers for the detail that's been provided there. I think Vicky said some of the detail on debts has improved our understanding of some of those issues there. That's really helpful. Right, so this brings us to Chair's business. And one of the items on this is I have a statement to read, which is in relation to stepping up. This follows the item that's been discussed before and follows the briefing that happened in April. So I'm going to read that, and we agree that it will be published in the minutes after the meeting. So I would like to make a statement about an item that is not on today's agenda, but has been discussed by the committee several times. We're not planning to debate this item, but I thought it's important that we make this statement to formally close this matter. Audit committee members will remember that at the last committee meeting, the 25th of March, it was agreed that officers would arrange a confidential briefing on the Stepping Up programme, and this briefing was held on the 10th of April. In the briefing, the committee were advised that an investigation had been conducted by internal audit, which concluded that based on their tests, no evidence of criminal activity was identified. However, there had been non-compliance with internal procurement procedures in the earlier years, and there were weaknesses in the management of the stepping up contract. These findings align with those noted by external audit. A few recommendations were made relating to compliance with internal procurement rules, formalisation of contract management arrangements, and referral to the monitoring officer of a potential conflict of interest. The monitoring officer confirmed that he was satisfied there were no issues of concern regarding a potential conflict of interest. The monitoring officer also confirmed that stepping up has been considered by external auditors and that there are no outstanding issues to be addressed. The monitoring officer has advised that the audit committee should continue to seek assurance and monitor the arrangements that the council has in place regarding procurement and contract management. Following deliberations by committee members present, it was agreed that the matter has now been sufficiently scrutinised and the committee has received the assurances it sought. Given that the committee has now exhausted its inquiries, this matter should now be taken as closed unless significant new information comes to light. The committee requests internal audit to follow up on wider compliance issues as part of the procurement and contract management audits during the year and report the outcomes to the committee before the end of the year. So that is a statement which I believe summarises the position following the briefing that happened on that issue, and that statement will be published with the details later. Thank you very much. I think so I believe the next item is public forum. So there is a question from Dan Aykroyd, which has been answered, which gives Dan the opportunity to ask supplementary questions. And it's really important that that opportunity exists because this is an important part of transparency. So Dan, are there any other questions that you'd like to raise?
Yes, I'd like to talk to you about my statement that was brought. For the record, I have very high blood pressure. I will try and keep my temper under control, but I am very, very, very angry at what's going on. This is a serious matter. I have been trying to find out if the mayor's emails have been deleted or not. If they have been, they are not going to be available for an inquiry into how this council had to spend £10 million due to the botched handling of the Barton House evacuation. If they haven't been deleted, then people have had their FOI and subject access requests unlawfully denied. It is a ridiculous situation as I can't get an answer to a seemingly simple question that have their emails been deleted or not. I also find it a complete failure in governance that people in the mayor's office, including the mayor possibly, were told to save the emails that they want kept for FOI purposes. This is laughable. If nothing else, were they given any training on what emails need to be kept? I asked that question at the Strategy and Resources Committee and have yet to receive an answer. I believe there is a deliberate and unlawful scheme to prevent the mayor's emails from getting into public hands. But I would like to talk to you today so I can understand your decision making in blocking my statement. When you received advice as chair, to block my statement, did that advice include the reasoning found in the Heason versus Public Services Ombudsman, which for the benefit of the committee can be boiled down to: where critical comment is made of a civil servant such that the public interest in protecting him as well as his private interests are in play, the requirement to protect that civil servant must be weighed against the interest of open discussion of matters of public concern. Did the advice you received include that reasoning?
The short answer is yes. We have received legal advice on So I should make people aware that there was a statement submitted which has not been published because our advice was that it was not appropriate to publish it. That we received comprehensive legal advice on that.
I'm asking specifically.
So can I ask Dan, are you now moving to your second supplement?
Sure, why not? I'll ask very clearly, did you consider whether my right to freedom of expression during your consideration of whether to block the statement or not?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councils are expected to err on the side of openness unless there are very, very, very clear, justifiable reasons to silence a statement. Do you believe that that limit has been reached? That there's no possibility of the things that were in my statement should be in the public domain, even though they are embarrassing for this particular people in this council?
Thank you for your kind of third question there. The council takes appropriate legal advice on those issues, and those issues that you raise need to be finely balanced. But I am completely confident in the appropriateness and balanced nature of that decision. And if you might be able to resubmit a statement to a subcommittee committee, you might want to seek advice about what can be included or not, because I believe the issue is not just whether the point of the issue is not where criticism is being made. It is the nature of the language and the nature of the claim being made. Thank you very much for your submission, and we look forward to discussing further in the future.
I'm going to keep going. This is too important to stop.
I'm sorry, Dan. We have reached the end of the public forum now.
This is a protest then.
You have asked three of your aligned two questions.
Okay, this is a protest then. I'm going to keep going for a bit.
Well, you've reached the end of the allotted period of the public forum.
I know, I'm breaking the rules. This is a protest. I failed to get answers from the Strategy and Resources meeting on two very simple questions. This committee has a responsibility for looking after governance in this council. What am I meant to do when the council leader accepts questions from me in a Strategy and Resources meeting and then doesn't deliver answers? Is this not a complete failure of governance?
Thank you for your statement and contribution, Dan. We have reached the end of the public forum.
Do you want to answer the question at all? I mean, this is actually really serious. Emails are being deleted. Let me give you the context actually. I made an FOI request in May last year asking for emails and WhatsApp messages in the 2 weeks and 2 days leading up to the Barton House evacuation. That FOI request was refused on the grounds that the council planned to publish that information in the future. I accepted that explanation on the grounds that I believed there would be an inquiry into Barton House. I am now being told, or people are being told, that FOI requests are being refused on the grounds that the mayor's emails have been deleted. That's a really clear example of where this council has failed to respond to an FOI request, and less than a year later is now saying that the emails have been deleted and that they'll never be available. This is a ludicrous situation. This is the Audit Committee. What are you going to do?
Thank you for your messages, man. The transparency.
Chair, you need to step up and at least acknowledge the seriousness of the situation. This is a crisis in the council where the law is being flagrantly broken to achieve a clear political aim of deleting the mayor's emails. This committee must take this seriously.
Thank you for your contribution, Dan. We have have reached the end of public forum. I'm afraid to say if you don't accept the end of public forum, I am going to have to ask our colleagues to turn off the microphone. I'd rather not do that, but I think that would be our response if we aren't able to progress with the meeting.
Okay, another question. In the advice that you were given, were any of the people that I allegedly defamed giving you advice about the acceptability of my statement? Just to be clear, as chair, you do have a duty to explain your reasoning to a reasonable amount. Were the people giving you advice one of the people that I was allegedly defaming?
So the last thing I'm going to say here there's three things. The transparency is really important, and I am very, very mindful of both the comprehensiveness and the privilege of the Council's legal advice. So I actually don't want to go any further. However, you've asked me a very specific question, which is were there any of the people that you referred to in your statement or your question giving me advice about the acceptability of their statement or question? I think the answer to that question is no.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Ben. That's really helpful. So we do need to move on now.
We all know that monitoring officers totally benefit, don't we? I think that's not really a big secret in Bristol.
Okay, I think we discussed the issue of not making defamatory or comments within the council. So we are going to move on to the end of the forum now.
He's all over that. He's hiding, he's covering up. None of you guys really know what's going on. Nobody's interested. Completely, utterly bent. You need to ask some hard questions. Because this isn't democracy. Even Tony Dyer said that he wouldn't pay no heed to what's said in public forum. Not at all. This is audit. What's going on with you? What's going on? Coward. And we cowards.
Thank you for attending the public forum.
Spies.
Thank you for attending this committee.
Chicken jockey.
Seriously though,
Okay.
is the audit committee going to investigate? There's two things I want to know. Have the emails been deleted? Were the senior staff who were told to mark emails that they thought should be kept for FOI purposes, what training were they given? Because it seems to me that the senior staff were told to commit an unlawful act of deleting records without any training or any thought or any consideration of the fact that front-end workers who have emails from people in the public have a different set of archiving needs for senior people who are working in the Mayor's office, where every single email would be related to policy making. My understanding of the...
I'm grateful for your attendance at public forum, and thank you for
3 or 4 minutes more.
Questions that you
No.
We've gone beyond the number of subsidiary questions, and what you're asking now, you're asking additional questions
Yes.
that were not on public forum. If you'd like to submit those questions, they will be answered.
I really doubt that. Any question I ask, or any statement I make that alleges unlawfulness by this council has been refused. Over the past year, I've had multiple statements and questions refused on the grounds that they defamed somebody. Where am I meant to submit questions related to law breaking if not this committee? Tell me that.
Okay. We are going to move on to public forum now. And
I
am going to ask for your microphone to be turned off.
I'll do it.
Could I believe that comment from...
If not this committee, where should I go to get answers?
So it seems that on the thrust of the statement has not been challenged, but there's potentially a defamatory statement in, and that's the objection of our legal advisors. So in that situation, do we return to the person that's made the statement saying this is the phrase that we consider to be defamatory? That might be a proactive way of identifying what it is at stake, so that the question can rephrase, make the same point in a way which meets the test.
Yes, I'd rather if that did happen. I think you actually have to take it on a case-by-case basis, depending on what's being said in the statement, because there are occasions where you can simply remove a couple of words and the thrust of the statement is unchanged and possible. There are some technical reasons. We are actually going to move on now to the next item, which is the
no, sorry, we're going to keep going for a bit.
I'm sorry, Dan, we are going to move on.
Will you give me a version of the block statement? Will you go through it and cross out what was defamatory so I can resubmit it at the next meeting without the defamation? That would be very useful, and it would be a way of resolving the situation. Because I don't know how to proceed. The only thing I know how to do is protest right now. If you give me a version of that statement with the defamatory bits blacked out, I will read that, I will try to understand, and I will resubmit it to the next committee.
I actually think that is a perfectly legitimate question. I think that probably wasn't possible within the timescale of the public forum this week, given the timing of the from Monday to today. I think on that statement, it's probably that needs a bit more work. But if that's something that we can
that's a way forward, yes.
For the next committee, then I think there is time to do that.
If you can do it for the statement I just submitted before the next committee.
Yeah, there's no reason why we can't do it.
Cool, thank you.
Colleagues, we are going to move on, which is to the work programme of this committee. Slightly more technical summary, and this is simply intended as a very high-level identification of the work which the committee is going to be doing. It's not really a substantive report in itself, but do members have any comments or questions about the items I identified? No? Okay. Great. If so, we can then move forward to item 15, which is our first substantive item, which is the annual report from the Chief Internal Auditor. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take this report as read. I'd like to highlight a few points. In summary, this report sets out my opinion on the overall adequacy of effect and effectiveness of the Council's governance, risk, internal control framework in 2024-25. This is a mandatory requirement from the Block of General Audit Standards, and it also informs the annual governance statement, which is a separate item in this meeting. My opinion is informed by several considerations, such as general audit outcomes, management assurance, and monitoring of the information of agreement and actions. For ease of reference, share. This is detailed in section 2 of Annexure 1, starting from page 30, where I list what I've considered. Having considered all the assurance that are available to me, my opinion is that overall, reasonable assurance will be provided that in 24-25, a system of internal control, governance, and risk management designed to meet the Council's objectives were adequate and effective. This opinion, however, means that while there are based on sound management, risk management, general control and governance processes, there are some weaknesses which may put service objectives at risk. I fully explain the rationale of my opinion in section 2.1 of our next chapter, which is on page 30. Chair, while this opinion is an improvement from last year, and I recognize that Bristol is a large and complex organization, meaning that there will always be areas requiring improvement, and in some instances risks could crystallize. However, I'm concerned that there are several key areas still requiring improvement, and these are listed in section 3 of Annexure 1, which is page 32. Appendix A and B provide supporting evidence for this report. Going forward, to maintain this positive outlook, it is imperative, from my view, that the Council continues to concentrate on getting the basics right and maintaining regular oversight and effective prioritization of key issues at all levels of senior management. Chair, Appendix A provides a list of all the projects included assurance opinions, which means that these areas require improvement. There is no intention to discuss this in detail, as we will bring the summaries to the future meetings, which will give the Audit Committee the opportunity to understand the issues raised and action being taken. From a practical point, Chair, I can confirm that in undertaking the audit work, we complied with the Public Sector and Audit Standards, which are now referred to as global health standards. In terms of independence, I would like to confirm that nothing has occurred during the year that has impaired my personal independent objectivity. Chair, I have no matters to escalate the audit committee other than those covered in my report. Lastly, Chair, I would like to thank my internal audit colleagues, all the managers in this room today, for their hard work and commitment, and also thank management and the audit committee for their support and effective collaboration. I'll end here, Chair, and take questions from my report.
So thank you to your report, and it is good to see that the level of assurance is improved. That's good. Do members have comments or questions on the So, yes, so Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just comments actually. I'd like to thank the internal audit team for their work during the year. It's good to see that the level of assurance opinion that's been given it is improving. It's particularly good to see that 98% of agreed audit actions were either fully or partially implemented. I'm pleased that there were no assurance opinions given. I have to say that the number of limited assurance opinions is higher than I would like. There's still a lot of room for improvement, but I think it's appropriate to recognise that we're in a better position than we were last year.
Okay, thank you. I think we have Patrick and then David.
Thank you, Chair. I'll echo Councillor Harker and congratulating the team on progress that's been made in the last year. It's really good to see the improvement in savings delivery, management actions and so on. I did have a few specific questions about items in the report, please. So, point 3.7, I think it was, about school financial governance and management. I was wondering what processes the council has in place to support schools who don't have debt management policies or monitoring of debt, effective monitoring of debt. So what's the council doing to support those schools to do better and improve their financial situations?
Either Sibyl or Andy, but I think to comment on that.
In terms of that, then where we have findings which relate to debt management or other specific issues, and what we can do and what we do is to point schools to good practice examples, particularly drawing on things which other schools are doing themselves. And there are some models around also which we can point out to them. We do also refer some specific issues where they come out to our colleagues within the council, both in terms of trading with schools and also in the central finance education team, so they can take forward and provide more specific advice when it's appropriate to do so.
Okay. Thank you very much. And then it's around one more related directly to the audit team. Under point 6 resources, we talk about the partnership with KPMG, which we have discussed before. I appreciate the value this partnership delivers, but could I check what the specific costs of the additional support we required from KPMG this year was, please, as well as the issue which was caused by the resignation of one of our auditors. I'm just wondering why that resulted in the need to bring in extra support where we're not able to recruit another auditor within the notice period, or was there something else at play? Thank you.
So our contract with KPMG is a call-on contract. So we don't agree with them the actual number of auditors that they can support us with. But what we do is that when we assess and find that we are struggling with resources, we then point, we can arrange to go and allocate some audit work to them to help us complete the plan. You will be aware that the audit team does not have all the sufficient resources, particularly around some of the key areas on IT. And I think members have been in the audit committee for a while, know where we have been with IT, so they've been very, very helpful in helping us in that. But in terms of the actual cost, so last year we spent 95,000 with KPMG, and the work that KPMG involves thought leadership as well as supporting us in the day-to-day management of the audit process. The other thing that probably the board members might remember is that we were struggling to recruit. I think there was a big challenge, and to be honest, is that we compete with the university, with the MOD, and times are not able to match what the other guys do. If you want to be the best in class, then you have to compete with the best in class. But at times, we failed to do that. As a result, we made a decision not just to go in the market just to recruit, but to find ways that enable us to get robust assurance. And I think the decision to bring in the strategic partner was meant to enhance the assurance that we provide. Otherwise, there's a risk that I'll sit here and give the audit committee an assurance that I am not comfortable with, given the complexity of some of the areas that you talk about cyber, you talk about sustainability. Those things are critical, but they require thought leadership. KPMG enables us to get there. Thank you. Then in terms of the recruitment, I think it was a comment though. When this auditor resigned, it took us a while to get to recruit for many other reasons, but it contributed to us not completing the review. But it's not the only thing that contributed. There were many things in there, including me being away for close to 2 months. So it has been, I think, a significant and challenging year in terms of resourcing, but I'm able to hear the whole year.
Thanks, Simba. And unexpectedly, I need to add a declaration of interest. Your answer has identified a couple of other organisations that apparently you compete with to recruit the best auditors available, one of which I work for. So I should note that I work for the University of Bristol. This is not a surprise or a secret. But I wasn't aware that we competed with you for talent on that issue. Thank you very much.
No, I think it was just the context of it.
Absolutely. I don't think that's what you said. David, and then Tim.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd also like to express my thanks to the internal audit team for the support. I wonder if we can have an explanation of some of the ratings that are listed on the pie chart on page 31, on paragraph 2.2. I'm happy with the very detailed explanation of what reasonable assurance is. I wonder for both the newer members of the committee and the general public if we can have an explanation of limited assurance, substantial assurance, and this new rating advisory, which didn't appear last year. So I can't wait to understand what's going on there, please.
I'm just trying to look at the right ratings for. So we use 4 ratings for audits. These ratings are reasonable, are substantial, reasonable, limited, and no assurance. So substantial, it means that there are sound risk management, internal control, and governance processes which are designed to achieve these service objectives, with key controls being consistently applied. Reasonable assurance that while there's basically sound risk management, internal control, and governance process, there are some weaknesses which may put service objectives at risk. Limited assurance. There are weaknesses in the risk management, internal control, and governance processes putting service objectives at risk. No assurance. the risk management, internal control, and governance process are generally poor, and as such, sales objectives are a significant risk. So those are the 4 ratings that we use. So the advisory relates to the audits, not audits, the engagement that we make with the business to provide advice. When we provide advice, we don't give an opinion. But that work is key because it helps us to understand the risks. And in some cases, we are sitting on project boards or transformation boards where we actually give a live where we probably raise issues and then go on rather than to give retrospective opinions when we do the audit. So that element of advisory is clear where we engage with the business advice, but we don't give the opinion. Where we are saying compliant is mostly about grants which we undertake, and we do a lot of probably large numbers, I think, painted in the report, a lot of grant work, and we give an outcome of either compliance or non-compliance. And we see from the report that I said we completed more than 120 pieces of audit work. That's why we pie chart in the report.
Well, thank you for that explanation, Simba. I was wondering if we could have a note to this committee about what advice was given to various things listed on the Appendix 1, because I think we need to understand what things we are advising our departments to do if they're not doing it properly. And if necessary, we need to be able to drill down and make sure that that advice is being followed. Do we have that assurance that the internal audit team will be following up on that, please?
So I think most of it, I think some of these are probably very small pieces of engagement. Or for example, there's a new system that's being implemented. People will come and say, these controls are adequate, and you say, yeah, they are adequate, and probably there's nothing that we give them, but just engagement. So for example, I sit and other colleagues sit on the transformation programs. We engage, so we contribute as part of the board members. So there might probably be no outcome that I end up writing, but I'm in the meeting, and if I identify that there is a risk, that I also engage and participate as part of the board, so there might not be any report. But the engagement is important because I will be able to share, or anyone of the people will be able to share the thoughts, what they are saying. So there might not be a list of the advice we have given, but there is evidence of engagement. But I'll find a better way of probably elaborating in future reports in terms of to help the community to understand the nature of the engagement that we do with the different businesses. But there won't be probably any return outcome in those cases.
Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Much of what I was going to say has already been covered by other people, but I'd also like to record my thanks to Simba and his team. I did get to meet most of the team in my brief tenure as Chair. We had a meeting with them all, and they did come across as a very dedicated bunch, and obviously we only get to meet a couple of them here, but there's a very hard-working team there doing a lot of work, so I'd like to register thanks to them particularly. And also just to say, thank you for the support that I was given personally during my brief tenure as chairman. I thought I was going to be here for the long term, and obviously things change. Couple of points from me on this. I'm really pleased to see the improvements in the Pentana system. The number of items recorded as being actioned, because that is something I've raised. People probably remember at several meetings, both in strategy and resources, where it appeared that we've done things, but we just haven't recorded them in the system, and it looks like we finally got to the point where we've caught up with that, so that's good to see. And the other thing, just to agree with the focus on maintaining schools. Although we see a better result this year, I think this is something that we do need to continue to focus on, because we don't have the resources in the council that we used to once have to support maintaining schools. The fact that many of them have now gone out, many of the schools in the city are now academies, means that our support structures here have shrunk quite a lot, and therefore we we rely on them to do more of the work themselves, but we do still need to keep track of how they're performing.
Thank you, Simba, for the report. In section 3, so page 32, you list out the 12 areas of limited assurance. So I think we're familiar with them. We all have reports on those throughout the year, but good to see them in one place. The next paragraph, 3.3, you tease us there. You say that some of those areas were highlighted in last year's report, without saying which those areas were. It's going to be difficult for you to remember this, but I guess I have more interest in services that have effectively failed audit for 2 years running, and then the management response from those services. But also I see that our management actions are now up to 98%, so it seems like things are getting better. So are there any that you know now are of particular concern, which we will then ask Andy to answer to?
Is that possible to highlight?
I think most of it is probably is in this report, and I think I've made that comment for the purpose, isn't it? Because they made a lot of improvement in some areas. But if you recall, debt management, this management was okay last year, but I think this year isn't. But in previous years, it's been a challenge. Information asset owners, contract management, and some of these things are reflected within the annual financial statement. I would say probably debt management, information asset owners, contract management, given the issue that we've had with the procurement breaches. But conversely, the improvement in the breaches would mean that probably we are getting better and improving contract management, but we are still concerned, as you will see in the annual financial statement.
Any final comments? Patrick?
Thank you, Chair. I was just looking in Appendix 1 of the report. Near the bottom of the first page, we've got one of the areas of review. It's grant certifications under the corporate brief. It's complete, and but the assurance, the opinion is given as 53 grants, £47 million, which doesn't seem to be reasonable or significant or limited at all. So I was just wondering what the context of that phrase was, please.
I assume that that's just the total grants.
So that's so I think that's the point. I think if you look at the report, so in the report I make reference that we have certified 53 grants worth 47 million. So what this is saying that we've completed 53 grants worth 47 million. And if you go down, if you scroll down, there is a total of 47 million. We list all the grants that we've certified, and it gives you that 47 million.
I see.
So the number completed and the value of the total grants.
Thank you. So I was just wondering why that is listed in the opinion column.
Give context, to give context, otherwise we will simply say compliant. But when it gives context, but all compliant.
They're all compliant, okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
So possibly final comment from you.
Yes. So as we would normally do in an internal audit report, we ask for a management response. And now, so I'm going to think, can I ask, how seriously is management taking debt risk, contract management, and information asset owners as areas which have not done well in the last 2 years, notably you weren't in office for those 2 years?
I'll just walk you through, in a way, how I worked with similar team, but also the corporate leadership board over the last 5 months and joined the council, where we're taking it very seriously. So in terms of outstanding audit actions, they become standing items on all of our office leadership meetings. So that does address 24-25 audits, but prior years ones as well, through the Pentana system, as Simon mentioned. Audit actions are being closed off, so any legacy audit review work is now being concluded in evidence, so we are cleansing, and that's why the performance has gone up. Then in terms of the areas that you touched on, these are live audits that have happened in the last year, and identified limited assurance, the managing our debt programme is now an adopted programme across the council that's not just being resourced through a small group of people in finance, it's council-wide, so we're engaging the whole organisation. So where there's a service responsible for generating income, they're thinking about the chargeable services that they have, but also the collection of that income as well, so changing the culture and the thinking around that, so taking it very seriously, trying to really instill good financial management across the organisation and backing that through good governance through managing that programme, corporate oversight level as well. So similarly with information, the training for information asset owners, I think this is now been completely concluded across the council, and I think all directors completed that training, so again, good take up. I think there were some gaps there and a good corporate push for people over the line, so again, addressing that in a really solid way across the council.
Okay, thank you everyone. And just finally, I'd certainly like to associate myself with those comments of thanks to the internal audit team, who certainly made a huge impact this year and previously. So we're now going to move on to the annual fraud report. So I think Louise, you're going to introduce this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to reiterate the key messages from the report, which are that we've identified savings of £610,000, 3.2 million in notional savings, stopped payments totalling £3,844 that were being paid out each week incorrectly. And you will also see that work from our new homes bonus exercise generated £164,000 for the authority. With respect to our tenancy fraud work, we achieved 30 outcomes, and that is either recovering properties that have been subject to fraud and misuse and they're brought back into our use to be available to somebody on the waiting list, or it could be a cancelled fraudulent right to buy or housing application. I'd particularly like to highlight 3.2 at the bottom of page 48, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act, which comes into being in September of this year, creating a new criminal offence, failing to prevent fraud, and that's an organisational offence with organisational liability when fraud is committed by an employee or a supplier or a contractor that benefits the organisation. So it's particularly important that we're aware of our fraud risks, and we've got our fraud risk assessments and our prevention measures in place, not only to prevent our losses to fraud, but also to mitigate liability for this offence. So we are promoting awareness of this new legislation alongside our usual fraud awareness messages. And at 3.5, this is possibly the first time we've raised career polygamy in our fraud report, which is an emerging fraud trend. Specifically, it's having multiple jobs, although we're seeing it's 2 or sometimes more full-time jobs simultaneously. So it's very new risk for us. We're reaching out to peers to see what other local authorities and organisations are doing. We've also been working quite closely with HR to look at how we can prevent this type of fraud and we can better manage it, and also how we might be able to use data to prevent and detect it. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that very comprehensive report. Could I ask you a question first on tenancy audits? So that's a really important area of work, which releases valuable assets to people on the, as you say, who are waiting for a home. The number of outcomes is a little bit less last year than the previous years. Is there any reason for that?
I think primarily that's been a resource issue. You'll see towards the end of the report we lost 2 people who took flexi retirement at the start of the year, And we also had one full-time investigator that's been on long-term sick for much of the year. So I think it's largely attributable to that.
Thank you very much. I think you really tremendous work. Do colleagues have comments? Jonathan first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, I'd like to thank the counter-fraud team for their great work. The savings are quite considerable. I'd like to just ask a question on the paper relating to whistleblowing. That's Appendix 2. And in the area of children in education, one of the allegations was circumvention of controls in children's direct payments. I wondered if you, if when you investigated, you found any evidence of that, and if so, whether it was by accident or by design.
So I'm actually going to bring Simba into this. I'm not familiar with the details of the whistleblowing cases, so it might be that we come back to you unless Simba can answer.
I can answer. Chair, I think we haven't done the work in here. I think we received a general statement on what someone thought was happening. In my view, is that this requires a proper audit to test the controls. Yeah, they say something is happening, but in theory, I think this requires a proper audit, which is an end-to-end process to test the effectiveness. So that work will need to be done. That's why I said control effectiveness to be tested as part of the follow-up audit.
Yes, thank you. When I saw that control effectiveness was to be tested as part of a follow-up audit, I assumed an audit had already taken place. But I guess that isn't actually the case.
So
it's still something that you need to investigate.
Yes, so we need to investigate. What we do is when we receive referrals in prayer, we discuss them, and some of the issues probably they become low priorities given the nature of we're going to be able to investigate everything, but the audit is in progress now. So we should be able to report outcomes probably in the next meeting if there is significant outcomes from them, but the audit is in progress now.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for explaining that.
Who was next? Ed.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much to the fraud prevention team for this for the report. I just want to touch upon one item in the report and then have a separate broader question. So firstly, on page 48, under the proactive fraud detection work, the last point 2.7 says, an experimental data match was undertaken using tenant data and online Airbnb data to identify council properties that may be sublet unlawfully. This exercise did not identify any case of housing fraud, and the Airbnb location data was not sufficiently accurate for this to be a viable routine exercise. I wonder if anyone here could expand upon what what steps took place and why it was that that it wasn't sufficiently accurate. What was it that you found when you attempted this exercise?
So there's some certain, I'm not going to pretend to be a data expert here, there's certain online data available publicly around Airbnb, but it gives you coordinates, longitude and latitude coordinates. So we had another team in the council change those coordinates to locations, but obviously if you've got a block of flats, it's not going to tell you which flat it is in the block. It was experimental. We thought we would try it. The Cabinet Office have actually been promising us tenants to Airbnb data match for about a year. It's not it's not happened, so we thought we'd see what we could do with the data ourselves. But the geographical data wasn't precise enough for us to be able to make it workable.
Okay, thank you. Just following on from that, so there were, do you as a department have any powers that would allow you to, say, compel Airbnb to provide you with more detailed information confidentially in order for you to make references? Has that option been explored, or is there a limitation of powers?
We would only be able to do it on a case-by-case basis. So if we have, in the course of an investigation, a specific investigation we're doing, we can go to Airbnb and get the specifics. In terms of getting data en masse, we don't have the powers to do that, which is why the Cabinet Office are leading that. The problems, I think, that they have initially been cooperative in giving the data, but then not going to cooperate with local authorities when we want to follow up. So it's with the Cabinet Office at the moment to take that forward with Airbnb.
Okay, thank you. And I think it hopefully does demonstrate the importance, because I know it's an issue that a lot of residents will care about. It's something that affects my own street. There are quite significant amounts of Airbnbs where I live, so something I know is the impact that has in cities like ours, and the need to be able to better regulate those services to prevent cases of misuse like this. The second question I have is a bit separate. So I'm a company director myself. If I change the name on my company directorship to my middle names, and then made the decision as a councillor to award my company a contract, would that not be considered wrongdoing by the monitoring officer?
Kind of legal advice rather than an audit advice. I don't think we have anyone in the room able to answer that. I feel like I shouldn't hazard a guess on legal advice, so I feel like we'll need to come back to you with a substantive answer to that question. I think that would be fair. Is that your last question?
Well, if an answer can't be provided, an answer can't be provided, but I would be surprised if the answer was that it's not considered wrongdoing.
I feel like I'm not going to hazard a guess. So we will get you a legal answer to that question. Any other questions on the fraud report?
Yes, thank you. I'll echo my colleagues' praise for the work of the fraud team. Incredibly valuable work, very useful. I was wondering if so you've declared savings or recoverable overpayments of 3.2 million, which is a fantastic result. I was wondering if you knew off the top of your head what the quote unquote cost of the department was in terms of admin and staffing costs and so on. And do you think that we would be able to recover more in fraud prevented if we invested more into the department? Is this a potential invest to save measure we could be looking at of pumping more resources into fraud?
I'm going to let Simba answer that question.
So I don't think that providing more resources to fraud will probably generate a lot, given that some of these things are one-off and they are not recurring. And the other issues that fraud will always be there, but the most important thing is making sure that we are targeting the right places. Otherwise, some of the difficulty that you can spend 120 days and then don't get an outcome. So that's the risk. I think that we just need to make sure that we don't try to put in additional pressure of giving more resources on the understanding that we generate more. If we are going to focus more on prevention, it means that we end up probably recovering less. If our prevention is good, it means that less things happen and then less things will be recovered. So I think that's what probably I am leaning towards. So I don't think the solution is on more resources, but for me the solution is ensuring that we have the right tools, including leveraging technology to fight and prevent fraud. So that's probably where I am with this. I don't think that additional bodies will probably change much. I think technology and probably other innovative ways probably do more.
Thank you very much. One final question on this item, if that's all right, please. We talk about, we've identified, investigation work identified 12 cases where a tenant of council housing had died, but the housing service had been unaware of that. Is housing doing any work to make sure they are more proactively keeping tabs on whether the tenants are alive or not? Not to be morbid about it, but that with a large population of council tenants, that is something you'd hope that they would be able to keep tabs on.
Or you to comment on that? We need to get an answer from the department.
I can comment on the work that we do. I think that we are probably because we use the fraud app, so probably the hub helps us to get to that data earlier than probably other colleagues. So I don't think it's about housing not doing what they're doing, but it's about us maximizing the information that we get from the fraud app to get to that area. So I don't think that it's just how we complement or work together with housing to get this, to get to a better position, but I don't think it's about housing not doing what they're supposed to do. It's possibly us using the fraud app to identify data that require probably investigation and recovery.
Any further comments on this? Okay, great. So that item is for noting, so we'll progress to the next item. Item 17, which is the draft internal audit governance, the internal annual governance statement. This is a substantive recommendation, and we'll be asked for our to support it after the presentation. So I believe this is with you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll give an overview and I might have similar to comments as well because the work involved. So just to give you an overview of the annual governance statement, this is it's a piece of work that's involved all heads of service and directors across the council in terms of looking at their services and assessing good governance, risk and how they're being managed, and that has been distilled and been fed into this report. And also in terms of the work that all the colleagues have been put into this, they've looked at external audit reports and our internal audit reports as well. So they've drawn on lots of information across the council to pull it together in terms of taking an overview and in terms of the way we're managing and governing the affairs of the council. And I just do want to thank Simba and Alison for their work on this, also in terms of coordinating that across the officer group because it is a huge piece of work. So just to give a sort of an overview of the paper, section 3 of the report sets out the framework for good governance, and that is guided by legislation and guidance. And then section 4 sets out the principles in terms of how do we meet and demonstrate meeting sort of the core principles around governance. One thing to note in principle G in the paper, there is a reference to cabinet. That is an error, and that will be corrected and removed from the final copy. I'll just want to point that out because that will need to be changed in the papers. So I think that really the key parts for me are really thinking about the significant issues, and we touched on the internal audit reports and some of the areas that have been identified. These do feed into the significant governance issues also, where some of the key issues have been pulled out in the reports, and we'll see through the papers this does touch on the dedicated schools grant and specifically the deficit held in balance on that grant. And this does relate to the safety guard programme that the council's in for a long programme of work to bring in the high needs element, the SEND provision that we administer through the dedicated schools grant back into balance. This is a significant issue for any council who's got a deficit. It will remain a significant issue until we're out of deficit, whilst the statutory override in place. That means legally we can hold that debt on our balance sheet, but it's not a crystallised council debt. It's being controlled, so it's a risk that's being managed. If that legislation changed, it would be a significant issue that we need to recognise financially. And I think government needs to think long and hard about doing that because of the affordability of councils having to fund that debt on the balance sheet, which is through an inadequacy of the annual dedicated schools grant versus the annual running cost of the SEND services. I mean, to the needs of people on educational support plans. So other key areas is savings delivery. So it has been identified that savings delivery has been a challenge, and for any council in the country, living within the means is a challenge and will continue to be one. So it's a key area of focus. Whilst the report does note that savings delivery has improved significantly in 24-25, going up to around 77.5% against savings plans. This will remain an issue that we need to look at in terms of the 25-26 budget and further delivery against plan for savings. So it is improvement, but it does remain a significant issue. Also noted the issues from the referral to the housing regulator in terms of housing standards and housing stock. That is something that's a recognised issue and it is being managed. And also I think the other one to touch on, as we mentioned earlier, was the council's level of debt and approach to debt management that that's been an identity to see how it's being managed throughout 2026. I think they're probably the main points myself. Similar to anything you would like to also.
No, Chair. The only thing that I was going to mention was that we see that the issues from 23-24 have been included in this AGS to reflect that there's work that needs to happen. So they've been there for that reason, and probably just for the committee to monitor and notice the improvement and trajectory in those actions, and they remain key part of the AGS. Nothing more, Chair.
Thank you all. It's obviously a really important document. Do colleagues have any comments?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy, for presenting the report. I certainly agree with the fact that all of those issues identified in Section 5 should be subject to focus and should be monitored. There's one thing which isn't in Section 5, which I thought, of course, those are things that were brought forward from the previous year. But there is an issue which I don't think is in the report, which I would have thought was worthy of some focus, and that's the management of capital projects. So in July of last year, this committee received the lessons learned report produced by Arcadis on the Bristol Beacon, and that did identify significant weaknesses with regard to the governance and management of that particular capital project, and recommended improvements that should be applied to the management of capital projects in the future, and also it mentioned the establishment of a project management office. I just wondered if this is an area which should be focused on and included in the annual governance statement as well.
Thank you, Councillor. It's a good observation. I'd probably say, looking through the paper, I would, in terms of programme risk, specifically on capital projects, the contract management issue that's been identified, would cover that, because there'd be a large challenges in any capital project that slips in its timescale or goes into cost overruns. Usually it's a contractual issue around contract management, but I do recognise your point about separating out delivery of large projects as a separate risk. So it's one that I could take back and talk to colleagues about.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, Chair, I have to say that under principle D, I think capital delivery, I think, is stated as an area of improvement. So it has been made reference to within that as an area that requires improvement.
Thanks. To endorse Jonathan's suggestion, actually, that our capital programme is getting bigger, and we've had these lessons, but I'm not convinced from my policy committee that they're being uniformly applied across all of our capital projects. I think the lessons about ownership, taking responsibility, aren't the ones which read over into our contract management item here, which is more about the registration of contracts. So I think there is a different dimension that's not included at the time. I tend to agree that it would be one of the things that we have been considering this year and could report on.
David?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm having a look at the government statement. Slightly surprised to see that there is no mention of how well public forum is working or not working. It's a really important function of governance to be able to listen to people from residents of the city. And I would expect it to be covered in Principle B, ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement, or Principle G, good practices and transparency. And I'm seeing no mention of it. So could we think about trying to incorporate some information about how the council thinks it is running public forum and how ways that it could possibly improve, please?
Would that be within the committee model review group?
That was part of the annual governance statement. Because we're stating how we think we're running the city in this statement.
Okay. I don't know if we have anyone close to that area.
Don't have a direct response for now, but we'll take that away in terms of suggestion, comment around, I think it's transparency, decision making, and committee governance basically is the point she's making, so we'll take that away. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. We will get a response to that. That's our decision. Thank you. Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thank you for the report. Just a few things. On page 69, you highlight the permanent appointments that we've made this year, and I think that is something the committee has been worried about in the past. The number of sort of interim and temporary posts there have been, so that is good to see progress on that. I think we'd all agree that that's a positive step. On page 70, one of the things that I have raised before and still a concern is that only 74% of staff having annual appraisals, and I'm still wondering why that is so low. I would expect that to be 100% or naught. It doesn't seem fair that 75% of people have an annual appraisal and 25% don't. So, I'm wondering what we're doing to get that up to the point where everybody is under the same rules basically and gets the same chance to put over their perspectives on how their job's going. And the only other comment I have on page 77, I know this one is, I don't think it's surprising to see any of the things that we've got concerns in here, but the one about placement of children in unregistered provision, I really hope we continue to focus on alleviating the need to do this, because this one is really important, I think.
Thank you, Tim. The comments on appraisals?
I'll come back. I think I totally take on board your comments and things that are underway at the moment in the council. The staff survey is just being completed. That will, the questions do touch on annual reviews and appraisals, so that information will be invaluable as well to hear back from the workforce across the council. And at the same time, the council's workforce strategy has been refreshed. But the metric is getting to a higher level of structure around annual appraisals, so we're hitting a much higher mark. And so that's something that will definitely be incorporated following the results of the staff survey. So.
I'm assuming that we have a centralised system for monitoring appraisals so that we can see which ones have been done and which ones haven't, do we?
Our HR management system matches that.
Tim? Patrick, you have a comment? No? Okay. So, do we have any further comments before we move? So, this is a substantive recommendation, so we're being asked to support the annual governance draft annual governance statement with those comments before it's finalised by the leader and statutory officers. Are we happy to accept that? Yes. Great. Yes, absolutely. With the comments reflected that we've asked. That's great, thank you. Can I ask when that happens? So is it finalised as part of the annual accounts, or is it finalised separately?
Yeah, it'll be going alongside the finalisation of the accounts as part of the sort of completion of the audit work. So similar colleagues will be working through to the final report.
The committee will see again this as part of the statement of accounts, so we can probably give you a track changes. If we're going to do many changes, we'll give you a copy of track changes as well, because it will be signed once it's agreed in as part of, it will be signed as the date of the approval of the accounts, so there will be opportunities for the committee to see it again. But this approval stands, it just changes they've made.
Thank you very much. So with that, we move to item 18, which is also a substantive recommendation that we're being asked to review and if happy approve. And this is the Q2 priorities for internal audit. Are we going to do
Yes. Yeah, so this report presents a Q2 plan for internal audit. The committee will recall that we plan our work quarterly to help ensure that it remains a flexible work programme through the year and also remains relevant as we go through the year. So the aim of the plan through the whole year is to make sure we're in a position to form the annual opinion that you've seen today for last year in the annual report. And the committee saw the Q1 plan in March, so this is just the Q2 plan for the committee to review and approve, and in doing so the committee needs to just make sure your own insurance requirements are covered by that. So you can see in Appendix 1 the Q2 plan together with the rationale for including these items in the plan, and Appendix 2 is a sort of longer list of potential audits that might take place later in the year, and those will be prioritised each quarter. In terms of resourcing, we are confident that we have the resources to deliver that plan. And I guess the key areas in the Q2 plan, Q2 is always very heavy on grant certification, as is Q1. And we have also provided full resource to make sure we can do that compliance assessment with the new internal audit standards, to report that back to you and amend in the November committee. Yeah, so I think that's all I really need to say. Just if you have any questions or queries.
Thank you very much, Alison, for a very clear work programme. Do you colleagues have comments? First of all, Jen.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, just a quick one. Just because it's quite difficult to coordinate with all of this and remember things. Is there anything that we were originally intending to do in Q2 that we've had to slip for any reasons? Anything important that you might want to flag up?
So unfortunately, we come to the audit committee in the middle of Q1, so we are still working on Q1 now, but because of the timing, we have to come to you for the Q2 because Q2 starts in July. So we are still working on Q1, but you'll see from the report that from the annual report, there were some pieces of work that we're still working on, which was still work in progress. But what we've done is we've factored into this plan all the work that still needs to be done. I don't think there's anything significant that probably need to have to the audit committee at this point in time. Remember that the majority of Q1 work is kind of compliance. There's nothing to correction.
Thank you so much. Just to add something to his question, I think part of the enforcement was something that was moved from Q4 to Q1. So is that progressing? Or has that progressed?
No, so that wasn't progress because we didn't do it because the individual was supposed to do the work, was away on sick leave. When we did the reassessment, I made a decision that I would do that as part of Q2 work because it was not as urgent as other people that they wanted to do. We were only doing it as part of just checking that the systems are effective and people are complying without any major risk associated with that. So it just changed from Q4 to Q2.
But that's not being wrong.
No, not
within this plan.
Yes, it will be done. It will be done.
Thank you. Jonathan, you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. I was actually going to ask about parking enforcement, but that's now been answered. Thank you.
I feel like I need to apologise, Jonathan. That wasn't the intention. Any comments from the 18th on the front? Nick?
To introduce myself. Actually, the last quarter I asked Alison if we would investigate our performance on FOI information requests, and she told me it was already underway. So I just wondered what would be the end of that process. I did spot, I just searched for FOI in this packet, on the previous item, it tells us that we received an enforcement notice from the Information Commissioner's Office for failing FOI requests earlier this year. So if that audit has happened, and I suppose if it passed, we would never see it, but it would be nice to know the outcome.
Yeah, that's 24-25 audit. That report is just finalising now, so we'll see the results of that. We're just agreeing their actions with management. It's headed as disclosure scheme in your 24-25 list.
Great, so that would be on the next agenda. So there was something in that report that would cause it to come to the next meeting.
Yeah, which is the assurance.
We're probably not sure if it comes to the July meeting, to the next meeting or following meeting. It probably depends on the date of that.
Yes, but what I'm sure, this will come to the audit committee. I think we're in the middle of just agreement and comment with management, and to give management a fair chance of responding before we report. Remember that there's, I think, a number of other things that we need to bring to the audit committee in July. It might not be this July, but it will come to the audit committee probably in September. But it will come to the audit committee.
Okay. I think we expect it to do that. So if it's going to come to the next meeting or the following meeting, that's probably, we wouldn't want it to go any later than that. I think that's probably fair. Any other comments on this paper? Okay, so we've been asked to give our support to the plans for which to. Are we able to indicate that we are accepting of that? Thank you very much. So we will move to, I'm conscious that we haven't had a break. I'm also conscious that there's only one substantive item left. So are people happy to progress? Yeah. So thank you. So the next item is with Andy. So this is the update to our risk register.
Thank you, Chair. Before I get started, I just want to introduce Steve Ray, who's joining for this item. Steve's our Risk Insurance Officer at the Council. So I'll go through a few headlines and maybe I'll speak to a few gaps that I might have missed to go through the report. So in terms of our Q2 report, this is a corporate risk register update. There's 20 risks identified on the corporate register, 1 critical, 18 high risk, and there's an escalated risk as well. So any risk that's going to the register. I think in terms of the critical risk, we touched on that also being one that's identified as a improvement issue of the annual government statement. It's the council's housing stock. So we're well aware that this is a serious risk that's being held at a high risk status, given the importance of managing and maintaining compliance across the housing stock. So the escalated risk is adult social care inflation, that's CRR 64. So this is an introduction of a risk that I think we felt across most councils, given the increasing employers' NI pressure and general market pressures in areas such as purchase care and adult social care. So it's recognising that this is a risk. In terms of quantification of that risk, it is still quite early in terms of going into the 25-26 financial year, but it's one that's going to be monitored closely as we go through our quarterly financial monitoring in the council also, and have ongoing conversations with the adult social care providers around really affordability from a provider perspective, but also budgetary affordability from a council perspective. So there's going to be an inherent challenge there that needs to be looked at in detail with our key providers. So I just want to touch on a few of the things. There's been 3 improvements as well, so 3 risks have been de-escalated as well, so that's good to see that risks are actually being moved out of the corporate risk register as well. And I think the final one I'll touch on is the interconnected risks, where we've got CRR 13, medium-term financial plan failure. So this alone isn't, or it's a risk that's being influenced by interconnected risks, a number of factors that are subsequent risks, including the dedicated schools grant deficit and a number of other ones. I'm pleased to say that there hasn't been medium-term financial plan failure during 24-25. The period 12 position has recently been reported to Structured Resources that does identify a fully funded outturn 24-25 utilisation of the council's general reserves. So that is a good position, but there's always with the challenge of local government, these are risks that are being held. So any one or two crystallisations of the interconnected risks does create a tension in terms of stability of our financial planning as the council. Just want to make that point as the committee. I think that was it in terms of the overview for myself. Steve, is there anything to do with that?
No, I think the report is to be read, to be accepted or to be received, and your points are the overview provided is sufficient. My point of view, thank you.
So, colleagues,
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to talk about CR62, the DSG, and the statutory override, which is due to end in less than a year. I wonder if we've had any, of course you did mention this when you gave your presentation on the annual governance statements, Andy. I wondered if there's any indication coming out of central government as to whether or not the statutory override will be extended, and if not, whether some other form of mitigation could be put in place, because I would have thought that, and I don't wish to sound too alarmist, but I would have thought that if the statutory override is not extended and there isn't any other mechanism put in place, then there was a very real possibility that the council could go bust. And I wondered what your view was on that.
So, firstly, I'd say in terms of any clarity from government at the moment, there's nothing on record in terms of continuation of the statutory override. I think central government will be thinking carefully, given the full balance nationally that's going into the billions in terms of deficits held on council's balance sheets. So that I think government will need to think carefully about the risk of not continuing the statutory override. In terms of Department for Education, I am aware that there is a full review of SEND funding that has been underway. We haven't seen the conclusion of that review, but it was mentioned by the MHCLG and Finance Director some time ago, so I'm aware of that work is underway, and I expect following the 11th of June launch of the comprehensive spending review will start getting more information. I suppose the critical question you asked is, in the event the statutory override no longer being in place, what the council is going to do about it. And maybe invite Barry to actually take an audit perspective. But yeah, I would be discussing with my external auditor about the ability to review the accounts with a negative reserve in place. That has been discussed prior to the statutory override being in place, and in my previous council I was discussing that with Brian Thornton. I think we had a differing viewpoint through the lead at the time, but really welcome Barry's thoughts actually on that, because it was a key audit point.
Are you able to respond to that hypothetical scenario?
Hypothetically, so I think I'll just reflect back what's already been said, which is there needs to be a national solution to this. We can't be in a position where there's a negative balance sheet, basically, so that's why the statutory override is in place. So we would expect there to be either additional funding coming through to remove the need for that statutory override, or for that arrangement to continue, or some other solution which nobody has actually communicated yet. But we can't be in the negative balance sheet position.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Anything else you want to add to that, John?
Thank you, Barry and Andy, for your responses. It is obviously something which I'm very concerned about, because there doesn't appear to be a solution in place, and there's still less than a year to go, and I can't believe that. Well, I would be amazed if central government didn't come up with some sort of solution to this, because it affects many councils, But it is a very significant area of uncertainty, and I think really central government need to provide an indication as to the way forward on this.
I think David is next.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about CRR 61, which has a rather long title about failure to manage the requirements set out under the construction design management framework. In the first 2 quarters of the last year, it was rated at 21, and then it miraculously drops to 9. And looking at the explanation on page 131, all the mitigating actions are supposed to be completed in March 2025, but they're not complete. So how can this actually have such a jumping down in assessment, please?
And you'll see
Do you mind? Yeah, my engagement with our health and safety colleagues was that the service team in question had demonstrated at an operational level that they were complying with the regulation, and that gave the comfort to reduce the score. The overall mitigation actions, which were due in March 25, the guillotine of the report was 17th of March, and there will be further updates on whether they were completed by the 31st of March, some 2 weeks after the CLB received the report which you now receive. So I will undertake to have the comment on for next quarter, which is Q1, to be tailored to your question and your observation.
Thank you very much, because it doesn't actually say that they've met the requirements on page 131. So it'd be really good to have that statement to say we're not worried about acceptable, but the documentation doesn't say that. Thank you.
Can I ask what the threshold is for a risk inclusion in the corporate risk register, as it appears inconsistent? I'm assuming the threshold is 15 because 3 risks related to children's services have been taken off, but there are still 3 risks that remain on the register with risks of 15 and or down to 9.
Okay. Council's risk management insurance policy determines the criteria for the entry onto the corporate risk register based on this score, and that score is 20, 21 or 28. Now, so if a corporate risk does drop below that threshold of, in this case, 20 to 15 or 9 or 12, it's not an automatic and quick decision to remove it from the risk register. As a rule, we don't just go, okay, it's down. So we tend to seek assurance that that risk score of less than 20 will be maintained and sustainable before a decision is taken to remove it from the register. We do refer to strategic risk versus operational, and we tend to ensure that the scope of conduct of the risk is strategic in nature, even though the basic criteria is a score of 20, 21 or 28.
Yeah, following up on that, you've said if something performs well for a sustained period and it's removed from the risk register, I'd always assumed that there were just multiple tiers. We have one risk register and the high scoring ones are put on something called the corporate risk register.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So it doesn't disappear, it just goes on to a different part. We don't see it, but it still happens. Yeah.
correct. The visibility of corporate risk through to policy committees, the audit committee, the CLB, is just that. Our council risk policy refers to directorate risks, and they are defined as risk scoring 14 or 15, i.e. between 14 and 19. They're the two scores, and they are actively managed at director level, the third tier of council, or executive director level. So there's those, and the third broad category of risk, what we call service risk, which is a risk that scores between 1 and 13, and those risks are expected, by their score, are expected to be actively managed by head of service. And if they do bomb up to 14, they go to director, and possibly executive director, and if they reach 20, consideration is given to being on the corporate risk register. As we've heard earlier in the presentation about connected risks or possibly sub-risks, if a particular risk scoring 20 informs or is a sub-risk of an existing strategic risk or corporate risk, we do disclose that, hey, we've got this risk scoring 20, but as it's informing another strategic risk, possibly arguably as an operational risk, we're not entering it as a specific new risk in the corporate risk register.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to echo Councillor Hunt slightly, and I've got a very similar type of query about CRR 43, please. Possible failure to deliver City Region's sustainable transport settlement by March 2027. My understanding is that this is a national issue because the deadline for CRSTS 1 is the same for all local authorities. And that obviously means nationally there are issues with high demand for construction workers and materials and so on to complete all these projects before 2027. So my question is, have we received any indication from government of any flexibility on this deadline, which would not only help maybe keep prices down through reduced competition from local authorities, but also might help avoid the disruption of 12 different major projects going on at the same time?
Thanks, Councillor McAllister. So we're keeping very engaged with West England Combined Authority in terms of our programme level as the Combined Authority administers the CRSTS grants, and to ensure that we can make sure that the funding that's been allocated stays within the region. In terms of direct flexibility around the application of the grant from the Department of Transport, I think that's something that government will be thinking about. So at the stage of through the comprehensive spending review, the continuation of investment in transport infrastructure across the country, and specifically for us in the Combined Authority region. So I don't think we've had specific guidance about continuation of funding. The funding has been allocated to schemes, and it's how we commit to the best way possible to deliver what's been allocated to us. But we'll continue to that dialogue as we go through each financial year with the Combined Authority to see what guidance is being given to them and what flexibility they can apply to a region as the authority administers the fund.
Thank you very much. That's a really useful explanation. My second point I really wanted to raise was CRR 60, which is the failure of HRA stock to meet landlord obligations. So this has been for a long time now the top line, bright red, 28 risks on the risk register. It's good to see the existing controls and the additional mitigating actions and the progress towards these. It's unfortunate something like fire safety is less than a quarter complete, for instance, but I appreciate the progress on this. But I'm wondering, given that it is such a recurrent theme in these reports, would it be possible maybe to get a specific HRA briefing on what's going on so we can, so the permanent members of the Audit Committee can properly scrutinise that directly with the officers and committee leads and so on? Because it's such an important issue for the city overall, and it is just something, it's been such a recurrent theme on this risk register. It would be really good if we could drill down to those officers and councillors on the issue.
Before we go to that, we have discussed bringing a deep dive issue on the risk register, that would be the most obvious one to start with. So I had sort of assumed that we would do that at the next committee meeting. Is that your plan?
Joe, if you're happy, I'll give that feedback to colleagues who are going into this one, so you have the right people in the room going into
the rest of the committee. I assume, or I imagine the rest of the committee will be happy for that to be identified in greater detail at the next meeting. Yes, please. Any further comments? Oh, yes, sorry, someone.
Chair, just to be clear, we are not going to arrange a briefing. I think we will bring a deep dive report in it to the next audit committee rather than arranging a separate.
Yeah, so that would be my suggestion.
Yeah,
because I think that is good practice, and then we develop our understanding of the risk register. That we don't just see ups and downs in the last quarter, but that we drill into the items in some detail with the relevant officers who are able to tell us the detail behind it. So my suggestion would be that happens at the next audit committee. But that doesn't mean that you can't stand back. Certainly to be available.
Thank you. So on that, there have been developments since our workshop a month or so ago. My suggestion there was we talk more about the risk management process as an audit committee rather than looking at individual risks, which I consider to be the responsibility of the policy committees to which they pertain. So looking at an individual risk, perhaps as an example, might be a way of illustrating our process, but I think that our focus should be more about how risk is managed. Which is rather dry, but the examples that we were given about the layers between the corporate risk register director and the service risk, I think that's the kind of thing that we should be getting involved with as an audit committee that looks at systems rather than plodding through one at a time various risks running across services that we don't have any individual experience of.
So that's an important point. I had thought that we were going to look in some detail at individual risks that seem to be raising either growing importance or conspicuously not declining importance. So I had thought that the committee would want to have that visibility. Can I just have an indication from other committee members if they would expect that would be interested in doing that? Yeah, I think we will do that if that's okay.
Not opposed to picking points of interest, so long as it's not just routinely going down the list, but a focus on systems.
That's understood. Any other comments from members on that report? So I think a valedictory question back.
Yes, third time indeed. Third time was the charm. CRR 64, risk of adult social care market failure. This is listed as a new risk. It's not new. We've known this has been a risk for a while. I'm just wondering why it's now that it's coming onto the risk register. Because we've known that the adult social care market in Bristol has been fragile for a long time, and this may be a failure of councillors on the committee to notice its absence, I suppose, but it's clearly been on. I'm wondering why it's only appearing now, effectively.
I don't know if Steve can comment. Do we know why that risk seems to have grown?
The risk itself only entered the entire risk register during the quarter in question, Q4. It wasn't, to be frank, it wasn't on the risk register and then grew to a level, as we said, where it became 20, 21 or 28. It's not to say that it wasn't being expressed through the lens of risk, because, as you said, we've been aware of the circumstances and the basic issue, but the risk owner saw fit to say, A, I'm going to create a risk, and B, it's going to be, the score is 20 or 21. So they're the facts and circumstances. They may not exactly address your coincide with what you've asked, but it was only a brand new risk altogether for but then as soon as it was expressed as a risk, it received that high score warranting escalations to the register.
Thank you. That's a good answer to answer the question. Thank you.
So thank you, colleagues. The recommendation here is that we review and comment on the Section 151 report. I think we've done that. We happy that we can close that item. Thank you. Thank you for your report and thank you for your attendance too. That brings us to the end of the committee. Thank you everyone for your engagement and support, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you very much.